So here's a little demo of the new flash setup. So this is the power unit. It's a Speedotron 2403, which is a little bit older model from the current 2403 CX, but it kind of works about the same. So on the top there's a sync cord, and I have a regular extension cord plugged into that I got, and at the other end of that I've got a little button I made, and it's a simple piece of PVC tubing with a button glued in the end, and I just took a power cord from an old lamp and I plugged it into the other end of the extension cord. So when it's powered on, if I press that, it'll manually fire the flash, and then in about 2 seconds it recycles, and I can hit it again to fire it a second time. So the idea is you open the lens, have the model stand or sit perfectly still, fire it once, fire it a second time if needed, and then close the lens. So it's strictly a manual process. Now there is a little connector on the lens there. You can see that little round connector, and that connects to this cord, which has on one end a mating connection for that, and on the other end just a regular outlet that plugs into the extension cord. So when that's plugged into the shutter, it'll automatically fire the strobes, which might not be the best way to do it, because the problem with that is you have to stop, recock the shutter to fire a second burst if it's needed. So that adds some extra delay and makes it harder for the model to sit still. So that's the power unit. Down here there's a power switch that turns the main power on. You have the modeling light. So in each of the strobes you can kind of see the flash tube there, but in the middle is a 250 watt normal halogen light bulb that is used to light the subject to set up your lights when you're not using the flash. So that's quite nice because it lets you get everything set up and get some illumination on your subject when you're setting the flash up. So that's what that switch turns on both of the units. These two units on the bottom allow you to switch the power more or less to one light or the other. So you can either use the same amount of power to each, or you can actually split it up in various combinations. And these switches are used in combination with the different jacks on the front. So depending where you plug it in and how you have the switches set, it will apportion the power to equally between the two flash heads, or more power to one and a little less to the other. So ideally for a key light, the main light, you want your maximum power, and then your fill light, which goes on the other side of the face, is usually at about 50%. So the way I've got this set up is I've got 1600 watt seconds going to the key light or the main light, and then half of that, or 800 watt seconds, going to the fill light. So that takes advantage of the maximum of 2400 watt seconds you can get out of the power pack. Now the flash tubes here can go over twice that amount, but the power pack I have won't drive both of them to that power level. So if I had a bigger pack, they do make one larger one than this, I could do it, but it's about the most I can do. But it's kind of nice because you're not straining the flash tubes that way. So you can see here we've got the same racks that I got with the compact fluorescent tubes you're using. Well, they fit perfectly for the heads. So you can see it, the nut here, it clamps onto the top of the stand, and it's, you know, a little wobbly but pretty sturdy. This knob adjusts the tilt, and here you can see there's a hole with another set screw here, and that allows you to turn these around and slide an umbrella or umbrella attachment through this setting and then clamp it in. So you can use an umbrella reflector on those units. There's a 11-inch polished reflector bowl, which is one of the best to be used. It focuses the light intensely, but it allows a broad enough fill for a good portrait shot, even when we're, you know, going at about maybe 2 to 3 feet away, which is extremely close. The whole thing is so hot that it's got a fan in the back of each one of these units. That kicks up a bit of a racket when the power supply is turned on, but surprisingly they run fairly well. There's not a lot of grinding, even though they're fairly old. You can see there's some wear on these things. But these are still in production. These are still the top of the line standard strobe light that's used by Pro Studios. So all of this is what they call the black line equipment, which is the top of the line professional studio grade stuff. The only problem with this was, you can see there's a light here, and there's a charge light and a ready light. So after you fire it, it's got to recharge, and you can set the recycle time from slow to fast and how fast it recharges. If you set it to fast, which I have it now, it draws more power out of the outlet. I was afraid it might pop the fuse, but it hasn't. So I'm able to run it in the fast mode, which recharges after 2 seconds after you fire the flash. So when it's recharging, the red light lights up, and then when it's ready, the green light comes on. I found out that the ready light wasn't working. It also gives a little beep when it's ready to fire. I pulled this little switch cap out, and you can see, let's see if I can get it. So the button comes out, and underneath there's 2 little light bulbs that press into the housing. One of those was burned out. So I switched the two, and now the ready light works and the charging light doesn't. I was able to find those for about 60 cents on Amazon, so I have a couple on order. So once that's in, that'll work fine. You can press this when the ready light is on to test fire it. But I'm using this sync cord here with the remote button to fire it. It does support a remote control that lets you set all these settings up remotely, but not using that, and not even sure what the wiring is. There's also a dial that lets you turn down from full power in quarter stop increments. You can reduce the total power. So you set your percentages of lights using these switches and the jacks here. In one case, 100% on the main light and 50% on the fill light, and then you can proportionately reduce the power if necessary after you do some test exposures. So that's kind of nice. You don't have to fool around with changing your f-stop or anything. You can just reduce the power by turning that down. So you turn it on, you can hear the fans fire up, and then the green ready light comes on after a couple of seconds, indicating it's ready to fire. And you see the fans picking up all that noise. Now if we turn on the model light switch, that switches on the halogen lights on both of the units together. So that gives you enough light to light your model there. Now if I were to open the shutter using our normal technique and the cable release, once it's open, I simply press this button to fire the flash, which I'll do. Whoa, you almost get a suntan even behind the flash units. And then in 2 seconds you can hear the beep, it recharges again. So you can do that all day. It's got enough. I think it might actually pop the circuit breakers eventually, because when it's recharging, it's drawing a huge amount of power out of the wall to recharge these things in just a couple of seconds. But it seems to be working okay, so pretty happy with it. So you can turn the model lights off and just use the strobes if you wanted to. So the thing weighs a ton. It's got huge capacitors and power supplies in there, but this is the perfect setup for doing portraits. So I'm thinking it's going to work out extremely well. So can't wait to try it. I'm going to hold off on any tests until Friday.